Hello, I'm Emma Desi, and welcome to another episode of Turning Readers into Writers. If you're brand new here, welcome, and here's what you need to know. This is a community that believes you are never too old to write your first novel. No matter what you've been up to until now, if you're ready to write your book, I'm ready to help you reach the end. I focus on helping you find the time and confidence to begin your writing journey, as well as the craft and skills you need to finish the book. Each week I interview debut authors, editors and industry experts to keep you motivated, inspired and educated on all things writing, editing and publishing. If you want to catch up, head on over to emmadesi.com where you'll find a wealth of information and tools to help you get started. Before we dive in, this week's episode is brought to you by my free cheat sheet, 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write. In this guide, I give you 30 ways that you can find time to write in the small gaps that appear between the various errands and tasks and responsibilities that you have in your day-to-day life. Now, you might be thinking that you don't have any time to spare, but I can guarantee these top tips will give you writing time you didn't think you had. If you thought writing always involved a pen and paper or a keyboard, think again. If you thought you needed at least an hour at a time to write your manuscript, I help you reframe that. You won't be disappointed. Get your free copy of 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write by going to emmadesi.com/30 Top Tips. Okay, let's dive in to today's episode. Hello and welcome back to this week's edition of Turning Readers into Writers. And this week I am interviewing Maxwell Ivey, who is known around the world as the blind blogger. And he's transformed himself from a blind, failed carnival owner to a respected amusement equipment broker, to an award-winning self-help author, a storytelling motivational speaker, an online media publicist, the host of What's Your Excuse, and the founder of the What's Your Excuse network. He has accomplished many challenging goals by being willing to ask for help and to accept help when it's offered, and also by deciding to find solutions instead of making excuses, and being determined to find the positivity in all aspects of life. And so I really wanted to chat to him, not only to find out about his life as a carnival owner, but what prompted him to write his book, his self-help book, and the practicalities of doing that as a blind person. I was really interested to know about that. And what I love about Max is that positive energy that he has brought to the world, and not let his blindness get in his way, not let a difficult life situation stop him from achieving more than many do. So I was really interested to learn about him and get some motivation myself from him to be inspired. So I hope you get the same inspiration that I did and that you enjoy our conversation today. Let's get started. Well, Maxwell, it's great to have you here with me today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, it's really good to be here with you, Emma. Thank you for your time.
Well, one of the things I was fascinated to learn about from your bio was that you started out as a carnival owner. And I'm sure lots of people ask you about this, but did you enjoy being part of that world? What was it like?
I think I enjoyed it most of the time. It's like any other business or profession. There are going to be days and times you don't like. I've watched the business change drastically over the years. When I was a young person, it was strictly a family thing where you worked about 9 months out of the year and you had to have what they would call a side hustle now for the other 3 months, and watched it progress to where now it's a corporate affair that's a year-round business where, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars are changing hands.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like everything, isn't it? It's become sort of.
Yeah. But in my family, we operated a small carnival. So, those times when you had to go a day or two before you had water or sewer were not fun. But being able to work with your family and being part of a team and having a goal that you were willing to sacrifice for, that was all really great. That was the part that I missed when my dad passed away and we eventually no longer had a carnival, was, having a defined goal, purpose, mission in life, and knowing that these are the things we need to do in order to get to that next step. And really, since I stopped being a carnival owner, even when I was helping people sell used rides, I really haven't felt that same sort of purpose or dedication since then. I mean, I've I've worked hard, but I haven't put myself really stretched myself online the way I used to have to on a regular basis when we owned a carnival.
Gosh, you surprised me with that because it feels like you've done a lot, which of course we will come to. But now, when you were a child, did you have your own circus trick? Was there a skill that you had?
Well, we were carnival operators, not circus people. But when I was young, at 4 or 5 years old, my grandmother put me to work in the cotton candy stand. So I bagged the popcorn. I put the butter on the popcorn back when you could still get butter on popcorn at the Carnival Midway. I did the snow cones and took the money and did the cleaning type jobs. And from there, progressed to operating games. And eventually, I did the bookings for our family's carnival. So I spent a lot of time on the phone. And then later, as the internet came along, online, sending emails, trying to fill up our calendar with events so that we could, as a group, make a living.
Oh, wow. So a real kind of lots of different skills there being put to use, event management, organization, the whole works.
Yes. Yeah, I have trouble when I fill out resumes because I've got more skills than they got slots for.
Well, one of those skills is, of course, book writing, and that's how you and I kind of got in contact, because I saw that you'd written a self-help book, and I'd love to know what prompted you to make that quite a big change, and how did that book come about?
Right. Well, I think a lot of this change really started about 6 or 7 years ago now when I won a guest post on a new website called Aha Now, and the owner of the site really challenged me to share what it was like to be a blogger, an entrepreneur who happens to be blind. And the post, when it was released, was titled Life Lessons from a Blind Blogger. And that really started the transition from selling amusement equipment online to being a content creator, an author, a podcaster, an influencer. And so that started the process. And then a little while after that, a woman named Eve Koivula basically dared me to write a book so I could take part in an online summit. And I started writing the book. And they came back to me and said, we've changed our minds. We think it would be better for marketing purposes if it was all women. So I said, well, that's great. You got me started writing the book, so I'm not going to stop. And that was in August or September of 2013. And by 2014, I had published the book with a lot of help from friends who encouraged me, and also from my editor, Lorraine Regularly at wordingwell.com, who helped me go from the very raw manuscript to the published work. And really, that's the honest truth. Somebody dared me to write a book that said, I think you can do it in the next 60 days. I told her she was out of her darn mind. And because I started the process, started writing those first few words and just kept going, it ended up in a book, or as I like to say, I never planned on writing a book, much less four. And of course, I still need to finish a series of books that started with my trip to New York City in 2016.
Well, I'm going to come back to that, and I'm also going to come back to the subject of getting help from people that you mentioned just there. But as someone who is fully sighted, I was curious about the practicalities of writing a book when you're not fully sighted. So are there special kind of software that you used? Did you dictate? How did you do that?
Right. Well, first I should mention that visually impaired people, just like any other group of people, are individuals, and we'll all find our own ways to do things based on our vision and our comfort with the available tools. So me, I'm a very simple person. I find talking to people and I find recording for my podcast, but I just can't get past the block in my brain that would allow me to dictate my writing. So I basically use the text editor or Word and just start entering it, just start typing into the documents. And then when I'm through putting my thoughts down, I'll come back to them a while later and do rough editing. And then when I think I'm close to finish, I'll send it off to Lorraine, and then she will take her red pencil or pen or electronic pen to it, and eventually we come up with a good manuscript. But there are people who use those websites, like I think there's one called Scribner or something. There's Gramercy or something. There's lots of online apps, and there are lots of tools for writing. But I find that for me, the high tech stuff just gets in the way of me doing the writing. And as you know, I talk a lot about avoiding those excuses or overcoming those excuses. So, to me, if I could use having to fight with technology as a reason not to write, I would.
Fair enough. Yes.
So
yeah, no, go on. Sorry.
So I just put it all down. I don't censor or edit myself. I try as well as I can to just turn off the editing side of my brain and put it down and worry about having it make sense or look or sound pretty afterwards.
Okay. And so do you touch type? So you automatically
Yes.
know what the keys are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been using keyboards long enough to remember a manual typewriter.
Okay, cool. Because as you say, one of the things that you talk a lot about in your community is sort of based on that around the idea of not giving yourself excuses to do things, and especially something that's important to you. And so, when I've talked to members of my audience, I know that a lot of people are they have sort of chronic conditions of one description or another, and it limits what they feel that they're able to do in terms of either physically or energy wise. So a lot of them have this dream of writing a novel or writing a book, and taking into consideration, your no excuses approach, what would be your advice to someone who has a dream but is feeling reticent or uncertain about how to get started and whether they'll be able to finish that? What would you advise them?
Well, one thing I would say is something I've learned from one of my doctors. He likes to say, Max, when you feel like working, work your butt off. When you don't feel like working, sleep, rest, or do something fun. So following off of that, I do whatever I can to try to make the things I'm doing feel like adventures or experiences. So the more you can see your book as a project that you love, that's something you enjoy, as opposed to something you have to make yourself do, that really helps. I mentioned my editor, Lorraine, a while back. She was having trouble with one of her own books. And she said something to me over messages. She said, I really need your inspiration to finish this damn book. Excuse my language. And I said, okay, I'll give you some inspiration. Stop calling it your damn book and you'll finish. And 2 weeks later, she sent me a message to let me know that had worked. So a lot of times it's really just how we feel about a project, So I would advise them to find fun and also set the bar really, really low. And I'm sure this is nothing new. People have heard this, but they haven't started implementing it yet. Never tell yourself you're going to write a chapter or write a book or write a paragraph. Just tell yourself you're going to write one sentence. Tell yourself you're going to put one thought down on paper or put it down electronically or record it in one of those note things on your phone. Because I find that if I sit down and tell myself I'm going to write for an hour, it ain't happening. But if I sit down and say, Max, we just had this great thought. Let's write it down and think about it a little and explore it on paper. And then I hear one of my clocks in the room 2 or 3 hours later and go, wait a minute, I've been sitting here writing for 3 hours? Because if you told yourself you're going to write for 3 hours, your butt would be sore before you even wrote the first word. That's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I certainly, I have days myself where I don't want to write. And my trick for my brain is to tell myself, I just have to write 50 words. That's all I have to do. And that's doable in 5 minutes. And then I've still made progress with my project. And it's impossible to only do 50 words. You get sucked in then and it carries on.
Yes, you do. Another thing I've found that works for me, and this may work for a lot of other people who feel like they have a lot of responsibilities, is I do better, and I'm working on this, but I find that I'm more likely to finish a project on time or early if it's for somebody else than if it's for me. And I think that's because of, over the years, just dealing with guilt. So I think for a lot of people, if they would say to themselves, I owe this book to the world, or I owe this book to myself, or if I don't write this book, something bad is going to happen. If you can figure out a way in your mind to make the book something you have to do, because as we used to say in the carnival business, and trust me, we didn't win a lot of style points. Our business, we were safe. We had one accident in 30 something years, and that was a broken ankle. But there were days when the canvas may not have been on, the lights may not have been strung, and some of the toys may not have been hung up. But when we made opening and people would ask how, my dad would always say, "What, did we have a choice?" So if you can find a way to talk yourself into the book being an obligation, something you have to finish, I find that helps a lot.
That's a really, I like that. Did we have a choice? It's the same sort of feeling of, well, the show must go on. You've still got to get things done, and if you have that attitude of, well, do I have a choice? Have I got to tell the story? Is there an audience waiting? Yeah, can push past that feelings of guilt, as you say. Yeah, because I know a lot of writers do feel guilty about writing because it's not something that is sort of social that you do with other people necessarily. It's not going to bring in any money or pay the bills. For many, it's a purely pleasurable activity, and so that can feel sort of self-indulgent, I think, to a lot of people.
Yeah, that's so true. But I love this new the train of thought that's starting to show up more in the online world. That is, if we don't support ourselves, after a while we can't support anybody else. So while there may not be an obvious tangible result from writing, it may not physically benefit anybody else, it may not make you a living, but what does it do for your mental well-being? It's like the old saying, if mom is sick, who's watching the babies? So a lot of times I think writers really should think about this book as their mental health program, that telling that story that they want and need to tell, that they feel in their heart will help somebody or is important. If you can make it a mental health exercise, like, I need to do this for me so I can continue to do everything I do for everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's amazing, isn't it, that when you do something that, especially a creative something that you love, even if it's only for 20 minutes, it has an impact on the rest of the day, and you feel good when you do that 20 minutes or half an hour and have fed your brain that bit of the nutrient that it needs, which is that creativity. It can set you up for the rest of the day and feeling good about yourself.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I schedule these conversations as early in the week and as early in my day as possible. Because I find that having these conversations, discussing issues like, how to overcome all the responsibilities so you can publish a book, I find that personally satisfying and energizing. And I tell people that one of the most overlooked and undervalued benefits of being a podcaster or doing interviews on podcasts is the emotional value to you of having conversations with people who understand you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And positivity is kind of a big part of your personality, what you put out into the world. And clearly you got the book bug after you wrote that first book, because you've written many now, but it's your third book, The Blind Blogger's New York City Adventures and How You Can Make Your Dreams Come True. That book was about your solo trip to New York. And you've said that it was on this trip that you cultivated a positive attitude. And I wondered if you could talk into that a little bit, maybe give us some examples and show us how did you cultivate it and what difference has it made?
Right. Well, I think I should mention that I've been cultivating this positive attitude over a lifetime. And one of the things I believe experts and gurus fail to explain properly is that no matter what technique you want to use, you have to practice it over a period of time before you need to use it in order for you to be successful at it. I think more people should talk about practice when it comes to affirmations or law of attraction or prayer or positivity. So as I like to tell people, I'm good at finding the positive because I've spent a lot of time on my backside looking up at where the sun should be, both literally and figuratively. I have a lot of experience. So over the years in the carnival world, you get a mindset where people generally don't care about you personally. The thing is can you find a way to meet the objective? And I've just really learned that you have to decide to find something positive in every aspect of your life. And some days it's harder than other days, but if you make it a practice of looking, eventually you will find those bright spots in your day. And the longer you do it, the more of them you will see. I like to say that being positive or finding the positivity in your own life is like finding anything else. It's just like finding the TV remote. You know it's there somewhere, and you just keep looking for it until you find it. So some days that's easier than others. A few years before I went to New York, I sold a $250,000 carousel and was expecting a $25,000 commission. And the owner of the carousel never paid. And, you know, we were already starting to spend that money. We had looked at cars. So that was very disappointing. However, when I sat down and made a list and thought, okay, what came out of this that was positive, I thought, okay, I proved that my concept works, that my business model can succeed. I proved that my social media network was stronger than other people thought it was, because I found the buyer within 30 days and the sale was concluded, and the carousel was on location and operating in Australia 2 months after the first introduction. That's very powerful to know that you could do something like that in such a short period of time with such a big piece of equipment that only a few people in the whole world would have a use for. People saw the blog post I wrote about the experience and started asking me to find them difficult rides, or asking me to list equipment they had that was going to be hard to find new homes for. And I received recognition from the Mutual of Omaha's Aha Moment program, where they published about me on their website and gave me a $100 check. So very bad experience, but I sat down, made a list, found some positives out of it, and went forward. And I really do believe it is all about our attitude and our expectation and what we decide to. And I've learned that the difference between spam and an opportunity when I open my inbox is how is Max feeling when he opens that app, you know, because I booked a speaking engagement 3 years ago, or 4 now, where somebody sent me an email on a list announcing an event. And I wrote back to them, I said, well, why isn't Max Ivey on that stage or at that mic? And they wrote back and they said, we can't think of a reason why you aren't at that mic. Would you still be available? And it was right here in Houston, and it was a great experience for the Foundation Fighting Blindness.
I love that, because when I was looking at your website, one of your t-shirts is, if you don't ask, they can't say yes. And so that's a wonderful example of how, if you hadn't sort of suggested, well, hey, why am I not on there? They didn't have that opportunity to say yes to you.
That's so true. That's so true. And in fact, the whole New York City trip wouldn't have happened, and almost didn't happen, because somebody, because again, I got an email that would probably be categorized as spam by most people. And I clicked the link and I started reading the bios of the past winners of the Amtrak Writer in Residence Award, which was how I paid for most of the costs of going to New York. And I started seeing where people had written multiple best-selling books. They had plays produced off Broadway. They had recorded albums. They had spoken at these different places. And I'm like, Max, I'm not exactly sure you belong in this group. But then I thought, it doesn't cost anything to apply. I have all the information I need to apply. So why not just fill out the form and send it off, which is my general default position. If I'm ever in a position where I'm like, nah, maybe I shouldn't do this, I'm usually going to do it anyway. So I sent it off to them, and a few months later, they called me about 9:00 at night and said, yeah, we want, you're one of the 24 this year. So that was a case where even I didn't think I was worthy, but I sent it off anyway, and I got a wonderful reward out of it.
But it's a wonderful attitude, and you say you've been cultivating that, because I think for myself, and I'm sure I'm not alone here, when I'm sort of thinking, gosh, I would be very fearful of the rejection of that and putting myself out there, and if I didn't get it, I'd feel foolish. Do you have those same kind of fears as well, or you just sort of push past them, or have you learned that actually it's all neutral and you just got to put yourself out there?
I would love to say that it's one of those, metaphysical woo-woo answers, but the truth is really very simple. I spent 15 years booking a 7-ride carnival in Texas where everything is bigger, and if your neighbor has a larger carnival than you did, there's something wrong with your town. So I competed against people who had 2 or 3 times as many rides as we did, who had newer, flashier, scarier equipment. And the only way I could get enough bookings to make it through the year was to just keep asking people, no matter how many of them told me no. And eventually I would get to that point where I would tell my dad, I'm tired, this ain't fun no more. And he would go, look, if you don't ask, they can't say yes. Now make the next call. So just like he would say it with a laugh in his voice. I knew he understood, but it was a practical matter. I had to keep making those phone calls.
That's wonderful for us as writers as well, because particularly people who do want to take the traditional route and get an agent and get a big publisher, to just keep going, keep putting the queries out there, keep asking, because you want to give someone that opportunity to say yes to you.
Right. And the other point I was going to make is that as I've been sending out, emails for myself, I've been pitching podcast hosts and reaching out to conferences to speak. A lot of people have started asking me, well, Max, why couldn't you do that for me? And at first I was like, well, I've never done that for anybody else. And then I eventually accepted a couple of beta clients. And so now, for people who aren't comfortable doing the asking, I'll do the asking for them. So I will book people on podcasts or speaking events. I will reach out to agents and publishers for them. I will do the asking, so all the negative emails come back to my address. If that's what it takes to get somebody, a record deal or a book contract, that's what I do. And I enjoy doing it because I've been told no so many times in my life. It's like it doesn't bother me anymore. And I understand that most people don't have that experience. They don't have that practice. And so you have 2 choices. You can either start getting the practice, and if you want to get easy practice, ask people who are already looking. So start with one of the multiple sites that will list hosts that are seeking guests for their podcast. That's low hanging fruit there.
Mm-hmm.
Start with websites like Haro, HARE, or Help a Reporter Out, where you've got journalists that are looking for people to contribute to their articles. That's low hanging fruit. Those are easy asks. And practice on the small stuff and then work up. But if you don't have the time, don't want to learn, or you just feel like you would never really get good at it, then hire somebody to do it for you.
Mm-hmm. That's what. Yeah, because that's something else that you mentioned in your bio, is that you've learned the importance of not only asking for help but learning to accept the help as well. So have you kind of found that a lot of people have difficulty with that?
Most everybody has difficulty with it. Even Max has difficulty in some areas doing it. So it's one of those ingrained things, especially in Western cultures, where when you ask for help, you worry that you're going to look weak, inept, or even desperate. So it is one of those things we all struggle with. I don't have as much trouble with it because from an early age, when they knew that I was eventually going to lose some, if not all, of my vision, I had people in my family and community who were teaching me that there was no shame in asking. So I have a lot of experience doing it, even going back to, junior high school and high school. And yes, I was the kid who usually had his hand up and was usually annoying people at some point. But the thing I find most interesting about your question, and you're one of the few people who's asked it this way, is you focus more on accepting help when it's offered. I find there's a lot of ego in asking for help because we still worry what's the other person going to think about us. But at least then it's something you did on your own. I find that what is worse, even more difficult for people's egos, is when somebody comes along and offers to help them and you don't remember asking them. Because in that case, it's like, hey, who do they think they are? I'm doing just fine by myself. I don't need their help. They should go help somebody who needs it,
Oh, yes.
So, yeah, so in that case, I try to help people understand that. One, it took them just as much, if not more, courage to offer to help you than it would take you to ask. So please be gentle to these people when they do offer their help, even if you don't feel like you need it. And for your own benefit, keep their name somewhere. So when you realize you can use their help, you can go back and ask them. The other thing I've learned is that we ask in a lot of ways without knowing we're asking. And what I mean by that is some people are going to think I'm talking about prayer or meditation or the law of attraction, and those things do apply. But what I'm talking about is we often do and say things that we don't know we're putting out into the world in our blog posts, our social media posts, our conversations with people in person or over Zoom and Skype. And there are people who know us well, or people who are just naturally intuitive, who are going to hear our conversation. They're going to hear what we've written, and they're going to think, you know, that person is struggling with something. They may not admit it. They may not even know it themselves yet, but I know they're having trouble with this, and I know I can help them. So I'm going to reach out and offer to help them. And I wish more people would think about it that way. It really is, and it does take a lot of courage to offer to help somebody without them having asked you. And I have an expression that has helped a lot of people because it really helps you put the focus on the other person and take it off yourself, which makes things a lot easier in this area, which is, and here's how it goes. When you refuse to ask, you rob the other person of the joy they would have received from helping you.
Oh, yes, that is so true, isn't it?
Yeah.
I fit absolutely into the kind of people that you're talking about. My ego often will stop me from asking for help. But yet I love it if somebody asks me, and I do feel good if I get the opportunity to help someone and feel like I've made a difference in their day. So I really
Exactly.
resonate with that quote.
Unfortunately, it doesn't fit well on a towel or a t-shirt.
No, yes, you must need to come up with a bit more compact way of saying it. Yeah. So I want to kind of come back to your blogging, because that's what you're most famous for. You're known as the blind blogger, and you've got a series of blog posts out at the moment for the Mobility Matters 2022. I wondered if you could tell us something about the virtual conference. I think it's a virtual conference, something a little bit about that, and why some of our listeners may be interested in getting involved with it next year.
Wow, I am so impressed that you actually noticed and had the time to give it a look and ask me about it. I can't tell you how impressed I am with you right this minute.
Thank you.
So this is one of those rare opportunities. I kind of feel like it's an indication that Max has either arrived or he's close to his destination, to use the GPS expression. The organization is the Portland State University's Department of Education, specifically the area that teaches orientation and mobility instructors, and they also prepare people to teach visually impaired and other students with disabilities in high school class and in the education field in classrooms. So that's what they do. And in order to promote their work, they started this Mobility Matters conference. This is their 5th year. And the idea is to expose people to concepts around accessibility and inclusion. And this year, the theme is really about universal inclusion. And I've learned so much and have had so many aha moments, because really I'm seeing this whole area of universal design and universal inclusion, which is something I really believe in, because I think one of the problems with the disability community is that there's multiple disability communities, that the hearing impaired community and the visually impaired community and the physical disability and the neurodevelopment disability communities don't talk to each other or work together. So to see a conference that's put on by an education department that focuses on the visually impaired, to do something that involves people from so many different disciplines, is really, really encouraging. And you know, their keynote speaker is a woman named Anya Kelly Costello, who is going to talk about disability and also environment when it comes to how we design spaces for the future. And the one thing that keeps coming back to me through what I've learned from the speakers that are going to present at this conference is that when you design to include everyone, you really avoid problems that you'll have to come up with solutions for 5 years or 10 years or 30 years down the road. I mean, for example, I spoke to the head of accessibility for the Portland International Airport, and two of the things they've added that really intrigued me. One was a quiet space, which was designed for people with autism, but turns out is being used by a lot of people who don't have autism just to escape the noise and hectic pace of being in an airport. And the other one was they've actually added a way for people to change adult diapers at the airport if they need to. So these are two different aspects of where design and planning is including people that you wouldn't necessarily talk about in the same breath.
Mm-hmm.
But by focusing on making the lives of everyone who could potentially use this airport, by focusing on everybody's uses, they're really saving themselves a lot of money down the road, because they won't have to figure out, okay, we didn't address this problem in the design, now we got to figure out how to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's similar with environment, because it's turning out that climate change and the way we are affecting our environment is resulting in a lot of the chronic illnesses and non-physical disabilities that we're going to have to deal with and make allowances for in the future. So it's really, gotten me to think. Every time I've pressed record, I've been personally affected by the conversations. Plus, there's some really cool people, had some fun conversations. But yeah, I would say if you're not going to attend this year, you should definitely consider next year. And I'm pretty sure that they will be making the conference available in a virtual form down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I appreciate you asking. And just the one last thing I wanted to mention is they found me and they valued the work that I'm doing on my blog and my podcast enough to ask me to help them promote this by doing these interviews with their presenters. So it's exciting, and it's a little humbling to think that such a prestigious organization and event would say, hey, we've picked you,
Well, it shows that your blog is really making a difference to people. So you've been running your blog for, gosh, I think a decade now. It's quite a while now, and I've noticed recently in my Facebook community a number of people saying that they would like to start blogging. I'm thinking you'll say yes, but do you feel that blogging is still kind of relevant 10 years on? And how would you recommend someone start a blog? And I guess the biggest question too is it a lot of work? It's we think of writing a book as being a lot of work, but a blog, is that the same? That even though the pieces might be shorter, is it kind of another full-time job?
Well, I've come to understand that whether it's this doesn't, I don't think, apply to writing a book, but when we're talking about starting a blog, or if somebody's considering starting a podcast, the real problem is people get distracted by all the experts and what they say you should and should not do, and what you have to do as part of having a blog. So I would say if somebody is able to focus on the most important parts of having a blog, then they'll be fine. It won't be all that much of a strain on them, because most of the people we're talking about are probably already on social media.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, keep it simple. Use WordPress or one of the very popular blogging platforms, and don't think of it as a blog. Think of it as I'm going to share my thoughts, my experiences, so that people can understand who I am and better connect with me.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on telling your story as openly and honestly as you feel comfortable with at the time you are writing, because as you know, the longer we do anything, the more comfortable we become with our own skin.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things we can share in year 5 that we wouldn't have shared in year 1. So that's the important thing, is don't get distracted by, mailing lists and lead magnets and funnels and how are you going to monetize and all that stuff. If you're wanting to start a blog, start with, do I have content, thoughts, experiences that I feel like I want to share with other people, and that by doing so, they will learn more about me and build a connection with me, or that by doing so, I will help improve their lives. So if you stick to that approach to blogging, for most people, it's not going to be a full-time job. It's not going to be another painful job on top of everything else they do. And in that part, I'm speaking to writers, because as a writer, as you know, there's always one more thing this year that the experts are telling us. Well, if we'll just do TikTok, we'll sell 1 million copies,
Yeah.
or if we'll
And so
just
do you
do
feel that
Clubhouse.
is it still kind of, is it necessary to be blogging every week still, or do you take more of an approach that when I've got something to say, then I'll share it?
I think that a blog still has to be consistent, but I've seen more very successful bloggers who only post every other week.
Okay.
So it's a matter of consistency. If you can create a thing where people expect to hear from you every 2 weeks, it'll work. One of my favorite examples actually is a guy who does a schlock horror movie thing on television, and he has a mailing list for his show. He only publishes to his mailing list once a month, but he has one of the most loyal lists that you'll see out there. So that's, his name is his on-screen name is Spenguli, and he's actually built a very solid business. He started out on one of the cable channels up in the 200s, and now he's down in the single-digit numbers through syndication. But even going back to his early days, his list was not something he published to every week. And for most people, if you have a blog and you have a mailing list, your mailing list is going to come out about the same time or same schedule your blog would. One of the things I did that some people will consider cheating, and some people will say it's a reason why more people don't subscribe, is I set my blog so that whenever I release a new post to the blog, it automatically sends that out to my email list, so that I don't have to spend that extra time creating an article or a message to people about the latest post. And what I do is, when I create the blog post, I think about what is a compelling title that will make people want to open the email that they'll get when this goes live. And so I don't even have to create two subject lines. And I think that has helped. Doing things like that, where you combine steps, or you say, and this is the most important thing I've learned when it comes to a blog or a podcast, is this something I personally have to do in order for me to be successful? Because, and this goes back to something I learned from a book I read by Louise Hay, who started the Hay House Empire. She says two of the worst or most dangerous expressions in the English language are should and should not.
Yeah.
So with your blog, it's your blog. If you don't feel like you should do something, don't do it. Because if you're doing things you don't enjoy doing and you're not making money off of it, eventually they're going to cause you to quit. Same thing with a podcast. If you're doing things with your podcast you don't enjoy doing and you're not making money off of it, you're going to quit. So if you get to that point where I really enjoy this, but I don't like that, then you have two choices. You either stop doing the things you don't like, or you get somebody else to do them for them. I guess you have three choices, or you quit.
Yeah.
But I don't like that third choice. That's why I said you have two. I don't like that third choice, because I've kind of gotten to the understanding that I'm not capable of quitting.
Well, it's just as well I enjoy doing my podcast, because it's certainly not monetized, so that's good. Listen, tell us a little bit about what you are doing right now. What are you working on at the moment? Are you doing another book, for example?
Well, I'm always trying to work on that next book. I had a stretch of probably about 5 months or 6 months where I either didn't have a working laptop or didn't have a laptop at all, so I'm kind of behind on things. The thing that I'm really working on right now, though, is this new What's Your Excuse, or WYE podcast network, where I'm working to help other people with disabilities start their own podcast, or help them get more exposure, more listeners for their existing shows. I'm trying to create a community of bloggers and podcasters who have a disability or who are able-bodied but want to support people with disabilities. And I feel like if we can build a community, not only can we support and encourage each other, but we can help grow those audience numbers to where those who want to can actually monetize.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Great. I think it's a great project, and what a lovely community to build. And I know that there will be a lot of people who really appreciate the work that you're putting into that. And if any of our listeners are interested in finding out more about you, about the No More Excuses community, the network, where can they do that?
Right. They can go to theblindblogger.net, and they can always send me an email to just ask at theblindblogger.net. The network is at wyexcuse.com. My books can be found on my website, theblindblogger.net, and they're all also available on Amazon. Actually, the best way to find me is to just search for The Blind Blogger on Amazon. My social media stuff is on my website, so that's always the best place to find me is theblindblogger.net, which I'm sure you will help people remember. And when I share that email address, it's because I want people to know that I really do want to hear from them. I don't feel like they should have to jump through the hoop of a contact form. And I also want people to know I value the opportunity to meet new people and see where those take me. And so I don't want people to feel like they either have to hire me or book me or buy something from me in order to talk to me.
Fantastic. Well, I have certainly welcomed the opportunity of getting to chat to you today, Max. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you so much, Emma. I've really appreciated it. And one thing I like to make sure that I share with the hosts is I started doing these conversations in 2013 because I didn't have an obvious, easy way to meet people face to face. And it's only because of podcast hosts like yourself that I was able to get out into the world and share my experiences with more people. So without you and people like you, there wouldn't have been The Blind Blogger or the No Excuses, or What's Your Excuse? So I want to thank you for being part of my story and my continuing journey.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found that helpful and inspirational. Now, don't forget to come on over to Facebook and join my group, Turning Readers into Writers. It is especially for you if you are a beginner writer who is looking to write their first novel. If you join the group, you will also find a free cheat sheet there called 3 Secret Hacks to Write with Consistency. So go to emmadesi.com/turning readers into writers, hit join. Can't wait to see you in there. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.